Well, hello YouTube astronomy enthusiasts. Welcome back to my channel. Mike here. And episode 4 of rebuilding this old telescope. And we're going to start off today and we're going to get right into it because it took me about a half hour to set this jig up, and in that time it's looking like it's going to rain. So I don't want to have to put all this stuff away and start over again. So I'll explain as we go what I'm doing, but today we're going to cut the rods to length. In the last episode, which I'll put a link to in the upper right there, we mocked up the telescope enough to figure out how long the truss rods have to be for it. So now that we know that, we are going to cut all 8 rods to length, hopefully, before the rain starts. So let me double check my measurements. And yes, I am a sweaty mess. It's about 90 degrees out here, and it's already rained twice today, so it's very humid. So we need 41 9/16 for our rod length. And I have 8 black anodized aluminum 1-inch rods in here. But before I cut any of them, because they're very expensive, before I cut any of them, I'm just going to cut a scrap piece of rod here and make sure we get the length right. So let me mark this scrap rod at 41 9/16. We'll do as Norm says here and measure twice and cut once. So right about there is 41 9/16. Double check it. Yeah, 41 9/16. Okay. I hope I'm not blocking the view too much. Oh, it's getting dark. It is definitely going to storm. All right, so I have built a stop for over here so that we can get all the rods the exact same length. So we won't have to measure each one. We'll just set up once. Make sure that our scrap rod here is getting cut to the right length. And then just throw every one of these 8 on here and cut them real quick. Get them out of the way, and they'll all be exactly the same length. We don't want a situation where the rods are slightly different lengths and you have to put each rod in its own position on the truss. No. We want all the rods to be the exact same length, and you assemble the telescope in the dark. You just grab a rod. You don't care which one it is. You put it in any slot. You don't care which one it goes in, and that's going to make your life a whole lot easier. Okay? I'm going to double check this one more time. 41 9/16. 41 9/16. Right. All right, so let me line this up where I think it's going to cut. Over here on my mark, and now line up my stop. Okay, make sure I'm still on my mark. I hope I am not blocking the view of everything. So I set this up, I set the camera up in a hurry because, like I say, it's about to rain. So let me lock my stop down carefully without moving it, hopefully. And I have the saw locked down tight with a couple of clamps too, so it can't go anywhere. So, okay, so if I hold this tight against the back stop of the saw and tight against the stop down there, let me give it a cut and see what we get. Let's check this piece and make sure it is what we want. 41 9/16 exactly. All right, good. So I can just run the other 8 rods, the real 8 rods, right through here really quickly. Get this done hopefully before the rain starts. Beautiful black anodized rods. All right. Very expensive though, so you don't want to mess them up. There's one. And I will put these over here where they can't fall down and mar their finish. Out of camera view, unfortunately, but that's okay. Okay, Okay, there's 2. So I think you're getting the idea. We'll cut 1 more on camera, and then I'll just breeze right through the rest of them and try and get them done before the rain comes. All right. Okay, I will point out one more thing as I'm cutting here. Check your rods. If they have a bad area, like this one has an area where the anodizing's been scraped off, I'm going to make sure that's on the waste side. All right. So we cut that right off. And the rest of the rod looks pretty good. All right, I got all 8 rods cut. I'm going to put them back in this box for safekeeping until I need them, so that they don't get banged up. Scratched up. And I'm going to put them in a place where they're not going to get jostled around until I need them. But at least that's done, and I got it done before the rain started. I'm going to have to hustle here and get my saw put away under cover before the rain starts. Okay, I will just say really quickly that I built this stop really quick and easy. I just had a couple of pieces of scrap lumber, 3 pieces of scrap lumber there, threw it together, hot melt glued it all together, and it just took a minute. I was in a hurry because I could see the rain was coming, and I figured nails or screws would split the wood. So hot melt glue works good. Don't be afraid to use it. Not a permanent joint, but for something temporary like this stop, works great. All right, let's move on to the next step in the process. All right, it's another day. It's actually been a few weeks since the last segment was filmed. And I am getting way behind on my schedule for getting this telescope done. It's mostly a self-imposed schedule, but still, I'm way behind and I'm feeling bad about that. So we're going to get to work today. It's a halfway decent day. Actually, it's a pretty decent day. You know, there's been a lot of weather delays, including a hurricane. We've been traveling a lot this year, and there's more travel coming up later this year and early next year. So I need to make hay while the sun shines here and get some work done on this telescope. So what we're going to do today is we're going to glue screws in the ends of each of these 16 ball ends. All right. And I will give you a close-up look at these and explain why I'm doing it. And then we'll get down to work at it, okay? So here's a close-up look at one of these ball ends. We've got a hole, a countersunk hole in the base of it that goes almost all the way up to the tip of the ball. Okay, not quite. And the reason we did this was the Mirror Lab crew sitting around brainstorming, generally in a restaurant, over food and drink. When we were designing this system, we decided that the neck here, where it narrows, is the weak point on these things. So what we decided was we would insert a long screw, steel screw, along the entire length out to the tip here. You get a screw out and show you. And that would provide reinforcing so that this would be much less likely, I think the chance is going to be pretty much zero, of this breaking at the neck. So what I'm going to do today is I am going to glue screws into the back end of each of these 16 ball ends. And then, once that's done, we can go on with assembling the rods for putting together the telescope. So yeah, there was much talk about the neck area on these needing to be probably reinforced. I think I was probably one of the main proponents of thinking that. So each of these 16, I'm going to squirt some glue in there, and I'm going to run some glue down the length of the thing here. And we're going to stick it in here. And I'm going to get glue all over my thumb. But there's one done. All right. So I'm just going to do this to each and every one of these And then once the glue dries, which according to the label shouldn't take too long, I gotta get a rag to wipe the glue off my fingers. But once the glue's dried, we can move on to other things, like putting these in the ends of the rods and securing them in place there. So I will crack on with this project, and I won't make you watch it all. I should be back when I'm done. Okay, so there we are. All 16 of our rod end balls have had their reinforcing screws glued in place. So once the glue dries, we can move on to the next step. All right, so while we're waiting for the glue to dry, I can do another little job. I need to mark drill holes in the rods at either end. What we're going to do is we're going to put some little number 4 screws in to make sure that the ball ends don't come out. I'm going to glue them in place, but we're going to put in some screws too, just to make sure. You may think that's a little overkill, a little bit belt and suspenders, but hey, what the heck, we just want to make sure this thing doesn't come apart in use. So I've got a jig here that I made years ago for another telescope project. It was a much larger telescope, so it's quite long, the better part of 6 feet long. I got 2 yardsticks screwed onto it here. I needed to put a bunch of holes in some long rods at various intervals. So this allowed me to mark out the rods and get the holes in the orientation I wanted them. So what this is going to allow me to do is I can set our rods in here, and I can mark them at either side, say a 1/4 inch in from the end to drill holes for these screws. And I can get them on the exact same side of the rod. Is that important? Probably not. But it just looked funny to me if they were all spaced out randomly. So I'm just going to make sure that the rods are drilled out on the same side. And to do that, I can use this jig. So I'll show you how it works. I'll zoom in here, and we'll do one. Okay, there's our rod. It's tight against the back stop over there. And I can just take my center punch here. I hope I'm not blocking it. I'm a 1/4 inch in. And there it's marked. And I'll do the same thing at this end over here. 1/4 inch in. Hopefully on camera. Okay, so now we got marks for drill holes in our rod, and they're both on the same side of the rod. Maybe a little OCD, but that's the way I'm going to do it. So this jig is also convenient for holding the rods in place while I drill the holes. It can't move while it's sitting in this groove. You can't rotate that easy while I'm holding on to it, so makes it easy peasy to drill the marked holes. Just like that. Alright, so I'm going to mark and drill all 8 rods, and maybe by then the glue will be dry enough we can assemble these things. Alright, I've got all 8 rods marked and drilled. Once I got into a rhythm, it didn't take long at all. I think the glue is set up enough that we can start assembling these rods. So let's assemble one and see how it goes. So I'm going to squirt some glue around the inside of each end of the rod. Insert one of our ball ends in there. And my thinking here is that the glue, once it hardens up, is going to prevent the ball end from wobbling, moving around, and the screw is going to prevent it from rotating or backing out. So that's the purpose for that. So let's see if we can get a screw in here. These are stainless steel screws, so they don't stick to my magnetic tip, so I have to be careful that I don't lose them before they get a good bite on the plastic in there. Okay, so there's one rod done. 7 more to go. Alrighty, well there's all 8 rods with a ball end installed at each end. Okay, that job's finally done. Now what I need to do is put the socket ends on the upper and lower halves of the telescope, and then we can mock up the whole optical tube assembly of the telescope. So let me get those parts out and we'll start installing the socket ends. Alright, so the time has come to mount the sockets for the ball ends on the telescope. Now I have to keep in mind that these are going to be out of sync with each other. If I mount one here, I got to mount one here, not here. So I got to keep that in mind. So I've already decided that this is the orientation I want the lower section to be in. I want this part to be down towards the ground down here when it's horizontal. So I'm going to need to mount one here to avoid the rods conflicting with the bearing, which is going to be mounted here. So I will need to mount one here on the upper section. Now the upper section, I have another quandary. Do I want to mount the eyepiece? Do I want to mount the focuser like this, coming out horizontally when the telescope is pointing low? Or do I want to mount it like this, so that you don't have to get down on your knees to look through it when you're pointing low? On the other hand, when you're pointing high, this is going to be pointing up towards the sky, and you're going to need an extra tall ladder. I think I'm going to mount it like this, because I think you're going to spend more time looking high up in the sky with it and wanting it in this position, because it is a fairly tall telescope. So, this is going to be up in the air a ways. So I think you're going to spend more time looking through it like this than looking through it like this. So I'm going to mount it like this. So that means I need to get a socket on this one, a socket on this one, and so forth all around. And then I need to get a socket on this one, here, here, and so forth all around. So I need to mark out the positions where I want these. Basically just center them up on each face and flush with the bottom of each face. That's the way I laid it out. So let's do it that way. And I will go and mark each face where I want one of these. And double check that I've got them exactly where I want them. And then we'll mount them after I pick it up off the floor. Yeah, and we'll mount them. Okay, that looks good. So let me mark these all out, and then we can start mounting them. All right, everything is marked. So it's just a matter now of securing these in place. I've got some 1-inch long countersunk wood screws here, and they are going to hold them in place. I've already got the one in there. I'll come back and hand tighten these. I don't really want to over tighten them with the screw gun. I will come back and hand tighten these and make sure they are good and tight. And now it's just a matter of putting 3 more on this one and all 4 on this one. And hey, we're getting close to having an OTA here. All right, so let me crack on, get to work, and finish this up. You know what? I may not tighten these down because these are going to have to come back off yet to refinish everything. So I'll just leave these on there sort of loose-ish for you know, mocking up later. And these have to come back off. I'll finish the refinish the wood, and then I'll put them back on at the end. Okay. Forgot about that refinishing step, but yeah, it needs it. I've got raw wood right here where I cut the tube in half. So yeah, got to refinish. Okay, so let me get to work putting the rest of the sockets on. Well, this is kind of an embarrassing admission here, but I skipped a step in my assembly process here. I completely forgot that there needs to be a nut glued into the back of each of these clamps, each of these upper rod ball clamps before they go onto the scope. So I mounted 6 of the 8 before I realized my mistake. So I've got to take those 6 back off and do this to them. Basically, we just got to seat a nut down inside each of them, like so, and we'll just secure it in place. A couple little drops of crazy glue. Try not to get it on the threads. And yeah, now these are ready to be mounted. At least they will be once the glue hardens up. So I got to take the other 6 off and do this to them and put it back on and put these on. So set these aside so they can dry. And it's not too big a deal. If I do get glue on the threads, I can just run a tap through there real quick. But yeah, I got to put nuts in there because, well, that's what the mounting knob screws into. Okay, so let me get these other 6 back off and get nuts in them, and then we can finish mounting them all. Alrighty, now that I have rectified my mistake and glued the nuts into all these socket ends and remounted them, it's time for another little assembly job. It was actually thinking ahead to doing this that reminded me I needed to put nuts in here, because I need to assemble the knobs that are going to hold the clamp part on. You know, this is a 2-piece clamp right here, and that clamps on there, and there's a knob that needs to go on there to hold that in place. And well, we 3D printed knobs too. Again, my design and Alan Maroney's implementation. I printed the prototypes out in PLA, but he's printed them out in ABS because he's better at printing ABS than I am. He's set up for it. He had the black filament. But yeah, the knob's a 3-piece design. Try to give you a good look at it here. Basically, here's the knob. You put a bolt in. It's got a hexagonal hole here. Again, a drop of super glue or 2. And then there's a cap that goes on the top here that just, with a little bit of super glue, hold that in place, and then we have a knob. And then the knob, I'll show you what the knob does. The knob clamps these 2 pieces together and holds the rod ends in there tight. So that's how that system works. So let me get to work. I've got to assemble all 8 of these knobs, glue them together, and then we can move on to another project. So let me get to work on this. All right, that went fairly quickly. There's all 8 of our, I don't know really what to call these, hand wheels, thumb wheels, handled bolts, whatever they're called, that are going to hold the outer clamp sections on for the rod ends. So those are all assembled. So while the glue is curing on these, I thought I'd turn my attention to the primary mirror cell. All right, the primary mirror cell needs to be, right now it's just sitting in here in the orientation I want it, but it needs to be bolted in. All right, so here's my cutting plan. Hopefully it's a cutting plan. I have some not quite flathead bolts, but very, very low profile. And I'm going to put 4 of these in, and I'm going to have threaded inserts that go into the plywood down here. So Hopefully I can get those in without splitting the plywood. I think that'll be a lot sturdier to have these to go into threaded inserts. Plus they'll come in and out a lot easier going into threads. So I need to mark where I want to drill the holes. Basically this is 3/4 inch thick plywood, so 3/8 inch in would be center. And each side where I want to put a bolt, there's already some holes here that were left over from the clamps that originally held the primary mirror cell in. We're not reusing those clamps, but I can use these existing bolt holes as alignment guides for where I want to put my new holes. And when it comes time to finish this thing, I will have to plug and finish those holes. So there's 8 of them. So, but for now they will serve as alignment guides. So let me get set up to. I will drill a hole out. I will drill a hole through here first, and use it to mark where on the primary mirror cell plate here, back plate, I want to drill for the threaded insert. And then I will probably get out a small Forstner bit or something and drill out for the threaded insert. So let me get to work on that. Okay, slight change of plans. I've decided to just go with my smallest Forstner bit through here. That should give me a 1/4 inch passage hole. And then mark the edge of the back plate with the drill bit. I won't drill into it too far because I want to be able to start a bigger bit there. And I've got it down here on the ground because my drill here has a bubble level on it. And up on the bench it was just too high for me to really see the bubble level effectively, but down here on the ground I can see the bubble level and see that I am drilling. I hold on to this anyway. See that I am drilling a plumb hole through here. All right, there we go. So 4 more, just like that. And since I have the clamp on the back of it, I've got the other half clamp down there to keep the thing level while I'm drilling. The point of the Forstner bit right where I want it. We're flush. Okay, we're plumb. Good deal. All right, let's keep this up till I get all 4 of these holes drilled. Then we'll work on the holes going into the backing plate because they're going to be bigger. All right, well, I think I found a way to hold the backing plate so that I can drill it. Got it clamped in one of my wood clamps, nice and tight. I'm going to drill a hole right there. And again, I'll be watching the bubble level on my drill. I've got a larger Forstner bit in here. I've marked the shaft of the bit with a little bit of tape to tell me where I want to stop. Get the point of the Forstner bit right where I want it. Check my bubble level. Sorry if I'm banging the microphone. And away we go. Watching the bubble, watching the depth. Bubble, depth, bubble, depth. A little deeper. Actually, a little too deep would not be an issue. Just want to make sure I drill it straight. That looks pretty good. Right about there. Alright. Alright, so there's one. I just got to do 3 more, just like that. Yep, now it's just a matter of screwing in these thread inserts. And once again, we have the crazy issue of needing a metric Allen key to thread in imperial thread inserts. We had this issue in an earlier video when I put these inserts in. Oh well. That's why I always bring both sets of Allen keys to the workbench anytime I'm going to need to use them, because whichever set I bring will always be wrong. So I bring both sets. All right, so let me get all 4 of these thread inserts in. And then we can mount this in the base of the telescope tube. and see how it fits. Yep, that one's going in easy. All right. All right. So be back when this is done. All right. By some miracle, I think I got all 4 of these started. Okay. I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. This one's spinning, but that's probably the one that went in too easy. I might have to put a drop of epoxy or something in there on that one. That one's going in. All right. So I got all 4 holes lined up. I was ready to go buy some lottery tickets because I figured I was lucky today. But okay, so I got to take it back apart because this insert is spinning in the hole. So got to fix that. But otherwise, I got the holes aligned right, so I'm pretty happy about that. Got the back on. So once I get the back off again, can proceed with working on the rest of the mirror cell, getting it all together. I would like to get the mirror cell all together and mounted in here, and then can proceed to mocking up the whole optical tube assembly. So, all right, we take this thing back apart and see if I can fix this issue over here. Just a little bit of epoxy in that hole and put that threaded insert back in, and we should be good. We'll see how lucky I am at getting this thing out now. If it's spinning. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There we go. Yep, the whole insert just came out. Okay. I will deal with that. I may need to run a tap down through it. It looks like that's on there tight. So it looks like maybe something wrong with the threads in there, and that's why it started spinning. All right. So let me resolve this issue, get that glued back in there, and then we will move on. All right. I chased the threads on that insert, and I glued it in, so we'll just let the glue set up on that. And I'm going to put the rest of the mirror cell together just to make sure I've got everything I need here. I've got a lot of the old hardware, the old original hardware. Some of it I'll reuse. Some of it I'm going to replace. And I've already got some new hardware. So let me put the mirror cell back together, and we'll take a look at how it goes together here and how it looks. And it ought to fit nicely in the bottom section of the telescope, whereas before it was sort of clamped on the outside, which was not a good secure way of doing things. Of course, everything's going to need to be repainted because I'm knocking some of the black paint off as I do this. All right, it's all back together. So this is not the way it's going to look when it's done. Like I said, I'll get some new wing nuts, and these bolts are the wrong type and too long. I was thinking about 3D printing some knobs for them, but I think I'll just go with some thumb screws like this, because these are your push bolts and these are your pull bolts. So what you do to adjust the collimation of the mirror is you'd loosen your push bolts, and then you'd adjust your collimation with your pull bolts. And then once you had it where you wanted it, you'd snug these back up. But yeah, these should have like heads on them so that they're easier to turn, especially in the dark and toolless. So yeah, so I'll get some I'll get some longer versions of these, which I don't have right now. I'll get some stainless steel um, wing nuts. And I think probably the rest of the hardware is reusable. The springs look to be in really good condition. They're not rusty. They might be. I don't think they're stainless, but they're not rusty. Um, so, yeah. And the mirror, of course, will sit on here. I need to fabricate some clips to hold it on at the edges, and I need to put some felt pads on here for it to sit on. So I will fabricable some clips and find my felt pads. So basically, I've got this all back together so we can mock up the optical tube assembly with the mirror cell in it. And I'm going to need to know how far all this stuff on the back sticks out, although I don't think these will be quite as tall once I get the right screws. Those are too long. And that will determine how far up this thing has to sit from the bottom of the rocker box, amongst other things. You know, you don't want the edge of it to smash in it either when it comes through 45-degree angle. So, but yeah, it's all back together now, and the mirror will sit here. I'm going to leave the mirror in its box, protected, safe, while I continue working on the rest of the scope. And then once I'm ready to determine its center of balance, I'll actually put the mirror in it, because we'll need the weight of the mirror to determine its center of balance. Okay, so let me, I think we're ready to actually try and mock up the optical tube assembly. So let me do that. All right, so off camera, I have assembled it. So here it is, the optical tube assembly in all its glory. It went together exactly the way I envisioned it. Surprisingly, a little difficulty putting it together. I was afraid the first assembly might be difficult. I figured probably similar to the way I do my large 17.5 truss tube telescope, just put the trusses in the lower section first, which will be sitting in the mount, I think, normally when they're setting this thing up. So that will hold that in place, and then put the trusses in and sort of tighten them so that they can't move, so they're standing up in roughly the position they need to be, and then set the upper section on with the truss clamps loose and sort of guide all the rod ends into place, and then tighten the clamps down once they're all seated. And I'll tell you what, when you tighten the clamps down, the things just sort of twists and moves and goes right into position the way it's supposed to. I'm actually quite happy with it, and it's sturdy too. You can pick it up and move it around, and it seems like it's pretty darn sturdy. Yeah, it's like we've constrained all of its axes of motion. It's solid. I don't even have these clamps down as tight as I probably could tighten them. They've never been tightened down before, so there was a little bit of creaking and cracking noises, but doesn't seem to be any damage. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It's coming along. It's starting to look like a telescope. So, where to go next? Well, I think what I need to do is get the mirror in it so we can find the new center. Well, I got to get the mirror in it and put the accessories on it, like the focuser, maybe throw a medium-sized eyepiece in it, put Telrad on it. Then we can find the center of gravity of the thing. And then we can put the bearings on it and modify the base. And hey, we'll have us a telescope. It's very dirty. It's very dusty. It needs to be refinished. So once I do all that, once I find the center of gravity, you know, I can put the mirror back in its box safely, out of harm's way, and just take the whole thing apart again and refinish all the wood, and then put it together one final time before we present it to its new owner. Okay, so I need to do a couple of things here. I need to find all the accessories and start mounting them on it. I need to get the mirror out and mount it. And yeah, it's coming along. I'm happy with the progress lately. I'm feeling less stressed. I was really worried there that I wasn't going to get this thing done in time, but I think it's coming along nicely. Oh, and you saw me pick this thing up a few seconds ago. It is so much lighter. Oh my goodness, so much lighter. Of course, it doesn't have the mirror in it yet, but and that mirror is a big chunk of glass. But still, this scope is so much lighter than it used to be. This is great. This is going to be so much easier for somebody to move around and store because it's light and it'll break down into pieces for storage. It'll fit in a closet somewhere. Wonderful scope it's going to be. I might have to buy some raffle tickets and see if I can win it. We'll see. We'll see. All right, so I would like to weigh this and see what we weigh now. Now, I weighed the tube alone back in episode 2 of this series, and it weighed 31 pounds, 9 ounces. So what have we got now? 20 pounds, 4 ounces, roughly. And this is with the mirror cell installed. When I weighed just the tube before, there was no mirror cell in it. So we've lost over 11 pounds of weight. Great. Yeah. Turning this into a Truss tube telescope, I think, was a really good idea. Yeah. I think this is a good idea. It's a lot lighter. It's going to break down into smaller pieces, easier to store. Okay, well, I've got a lot of work left to do on this thing, but after looking at the length that this video is getting, I know in the age of TikTok, people's attention spans are short, so we will pick up in episode 5 with the rest of the work on this. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this somewhat interesting, educational, informative, inspirational, whatever. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up. And subscribe to see the future videos in this series and all the other videos I put out on this channel. So thanks again for watching. See you next time. Bye.